Good evening from the Convergence Studio at the Water Tower campus, and welcome to the second and final 2012 Unified Student Government Association debate. I'm Sean Vera, student body president and moderator for tonight's debate. On my left, we have Matthew Razek and Julia Poirier. On my right, Eftiola Trebicka and Matthew Smitty Smith. The rules for tonight are simple. Tonight's discussion will cover 5 topics, and we'll spend about 10 minutes on each topic. Each candidate will have about 30 seconds to answer a question, and I'll encourage follow-up questions from each of the candidates. So let's begin. Our first topic for tonight is tuition. So the first question is, based on what you know and from your personal experiences, why is tuition going up at Loyola? Matt, let's start with you.
I think the tuition is going up at Loyola because of the top-tier education that Loyola provides its students. With each year that tuition goes up, faculty and staff members are getting raises so that Loyola is attracting more and more individuals to come and teach our students. We also have this year an increase in the Student Activities Fund, which is the first time that the SAF has gone up in a couple of years, and that's going to allow students to have more money to be able to use for student programs or for 8-ride and shuttle services if those will be getting an increase. So tuition's going up so that Loyola could stay one of the top universities.
Julia?
I believe tuition's also going up to pay for the salaries of our fine professors at Loyola. However, I think that tuition is an issue that students need to really have a voice in more. I think that the school could strategically plan to make tuition at a set rate all 4 years and still have a great administration, great services for students, and also great faculty and staff.
FD?
Really, tuition's going up for 2 big reasons. One is to keep up with our competitive nature, and the other is to also keep up with our students and the needs of our students. So with the increase of salaries, there's also an increase of financial aid to help students who are unable to pay due to any unforeseen reason or just due to their socioeconomic status, really to help them pay. And those are really the 2 main reasons why tuition's going up, in my view.
Smitty?
I'd say the main reason tuition is going up is what we see every single day. It's all the construction going on campus, the renovations with the buildings, the improvement of the buildings, just like Canoe Hall that we're seeing right now, the improvement of the Gentile Center and whatnot for the students themselves. As you see with the Reimagine campaign going on, we'll see as each year, and to pay for that off, the tuition will increase. So thank you.
All right, so that's one thing that has been brought up during the campaign is this idea of setting a rate or a grandfather clause, as we've been talking about. So let's talk a little bit about that. Is that a fair way of doing business in terms of setting tuition? And let's talk a little bit about what that would look like. So anybody can feel free to jump in. Go ahead.
I don't think that it would be fair to set a grandfather clause at Loyola because that would require incoming classes to be paying more than the senior class. If you have an average tuition increase of 3% a year, that means that if everyone is grandfathered in, the freshman class would need to increase about 12% if you don't want to take from Loyola's endowment. And I think that that is taking away from financial aid, and that's taking away from the quality of education that the freshman students get. They're going to be paying a lot more than they should be coming to Loyola, and we'll be a school that's about $50,000 before any other school.
Any other?
I'll comment on that.
Sure.
I think it is important to have a grandfathered in tuition because I think it's really about caring for all the students while they're here. Student aid and student debt is a very serious issue. It's said to be the next economic bubble crisis. So I think that Loyola must start to really focus on how much they're caring for their students while they're enrolled at Loyola. I think it's really important to also focus on not having to take out more loans. Loans are building up, so really it's taking about care of the student while they're here.
Smitty.
I would just like to bring up the fact then, as Matt brought up the fact of the increase of 12%, the issue would be how could you, by increasing the tuition for the incoming freshmen, how would we attract students with already the increasement or the increase of the ACT requirement? How would we bring in students by increasing the tuition there? I agree with Matt in the sense that a gradual increase would make sense for people. It wouldn't seem as great at the beginning because already as people are coming into college, incoming freshmen, they have to deal with, boom, that first amount, that first price.
Really, I just believe that a grandfathered in tuition is unfair for students. It's unfair for students that are currently here. It's unrealistic, really, to implement it. At universities that do implement it, that are private universities, the only one that comes to mind is the George Washington University, who has about $300 million of endowment. Loyola is not nearly close to that at all. Although we have a decent endowment, we don't have that yet. And in addition to that, really, it's hard to set a grandfathered in tuition for students that are currently here if we want to just set that all of a sudden.
Sean, can I also add something
Sure.
into that? So, and I also think that with a grandfathered tuition, that as the freshman class increases in price, you're also taking away from the diversity that Loyola is trying to get. As Loyola is trying to get a more diverse campus, as you increase the freshman class tuition, you're not going to be able to get that diverse class of students because you're going to be charging them a lot more than you would the current students at Loyola. So I think that with Loyola's initiatives to become more diverse as a university, a grandfathered clause in the tuition will be very hard in order to do that.
Can I come in on that? If Loyola does need to raise the tuition, however, it will affect students who are already here and might have to drop out. I know a lot of students who've had these issues and really have been making that difficult decision. They've fallen in love with Loyola, but they keep seeing that the tuition has been raised and they have not planned for that financially because they weren't aware that they were going to get these increases every single year. I think also if a grandfather tuition isn't practical, if the administration finds out that there's no way to do that, I think students are entitled to a line-by-line statement of where that money is going and making sure that money is going to all students.
More than anything, though, it's important for financial aid to be increased. More than anything, students need to be provided for their education. If tuition goes up, financial aid absolutely has to go up, and that's where the key issue of that is. That's how you maintain that socioeconomic diversity. That's how you continue to foster a positive student body and to really continue to allow Loyola to grow. It helps us to grow financially as a university as well as help our students to stay here. Financial aid is really the key to dealing with the issue.
Julia, you mentioned something just a minute ago that I think we should talk a little bit about, a line-by-line statement. What exactly does that mean for you? Or, you know, if you were to propose that kind of solution, how do you think that would work?
So I think that would work in the address that Father Garanzini sends out during the years. So really focusing on where that money is going, saying this is how much is going to academics, this is how much is going to these services, and really making sure that they don't get allocated in one position to one certain type of students, but really open to all the students and make sure that all the students can access that money and really reap the benefits for their tuition increase.
The university I know does, and it was something I was looking at yesterday, and unfortunately it was too long, so I didn't print. There's too many pages, so I didn't print it out. But the university does have an annual report that they release at the end of each fiscal year that explains some of the line items and where stuff was spent. They don't explain everything in detail, but they will explain how much was allocated to the students, how much was allocated to salaries. So they do explain that just after the year, and I think that at least they're doing that much. So I think that if it was to be done beforehand, then that may be giving too much information as stuff changes.
I think it's important to keep the students in that loop, in that communication process, though, and really, because we are having to take out more loans, students should be entitled to that kind of knowledge.
Sure, I think that brings up a big question. Loyola's tuition went up this year 2.75%. The average across the country for public universities is 8.3%, and at private universities, 4.3%. How much of an issue really is this, specifically as it relates to Loyola? I'm sure schools across the country would differ on that answer, but specifically here.
I think really it still is an issue because our students still have to fund and they still have to find more funds. But in comparison, we are doing well in the fact that we continue to have a boom within our university. We do make sure that students are absolutely aware of the fact that this is where this money is going and this is how much we're spending in terms of salaries, in terms of financial aid, and in terms of all of those things. And in reality, it's kind of unrealistic to really look at a total financial budget and see exactly where. I mean, do we really... I mean, we need to know what goes into these things, but do we really need to know line by line, know how much goes into paper clips and staples? But really, it's important just to look at it as kind of a holistic thing to make sure that things are going in the right place.
Great. Let's move on to our next topic, transportation. So the first question, and we'll start in the reverse order this time, what are specific tactics you would like to see to improve transportation on campus? So Smitty?
Personally, I'd say on campus, in regards to transportation, I'd say maybe you can increase the way the 8-ride vans work, the radius that they extend. Right now it's 1.5 miles off campus. I feel like that could increase in the sense, because I know some people have issues the farther they live away, instead of having to deal with the L, they could take the 8-ride van. But really, besides that, I mean, I feel like as of now, the way the shuttle system's working, the way we're going towards sustainability with the shuttles, transportation is not a major issue in that sense. I feel like the issue we were talking about before that we'll continue to talk about is a bigger deal. But I mean, transportation, like I said, Loyola's going in the right direction. So.
FD?
I think the big thing is publicity. For example, I took the shuttle at around noon, and at noontime it goes every 15 minutes instead of every 20 minutes. So really to make sure students know what that schedule looks like and to have an understanding of how things work, to have this kind of information public and publicized. Currently, if you log online, you won't be able to see the certain times. Possibly having something like a shuttle tracker, that would be something nice. Or for 8-ride, really to possibly cut one van and maybe make it go later, later than it currently does. 2 a.m. is great, but students need transportation later than that. So really transportation during the night is definitely important, as well as just publicizing transportation and knowing its availability.
Julia?
I would say transportation goes hand in hand with safety issues. So I would really like to see the shuttle be extended to weekend hours, and I know that is a significant amount of money, but I really think it's a safety issue for downtown students. There are a lot of events that are held on Lakeshore campus at night, and some students are forced into situations that are more than they are very unsafe. So I'd really like to see that extended, as well as thinking of also other creative solutions to making sure that students from both campuses can access each campus.
Matt?
I was just talking to a student this past week, and he was informing me that there's no 8-ride service at Water Tower. And I think I knew that, but not until a student actually pointed it out to me did I really start thinking about it, and how our Water Tower campus students don't have any sort of transportation at night, even though it's a smaller campus, but it's still in the heart of downtown. Sometimes you're not going to be as safe as you would think. I also think that we can really improve shuttle service, like Julia was saying, on the weekends. And when the information commons went open 24/5, they didn't get a budget increase, and they were totally fine staying open. So I think it's really encouraging transportation services to really work with the students to make sure that we can make that available for those students at Lakeshore and Water Tower campus.
There were a couple issues that were brought up, so let's talk about this idea of 8-ride downtown. As we know, the downtown campus kind of makes up just 2 blocks right here. So considering the financial implications of that, should there be an 8-ride service downtown, and how would that look?
I think that you can have it downtown. I think that the radius wouldn't be as large, like 1.5 miles, as the Lakeshore campus. But I also think that you may be able to take a van away from the Lakeshore campus, bring it downtown for a few hours, and then have it go back to the Lakeshore campus. So you could still do that under the current way things are. It's just working with transportation services to see when 8-ride's being utilized most by students. Because to be honest, I don't know if they publicize certain hours of the night that students are really utilizing it. So if you make use of the time that you have individuals driving the vans, I think you should be able to bring it to the Water Tower campus.
I mean, I'd like to bring up the point, though, the fact that, I mean, by bringing a van down, that would take away one from the Lakeshore campus. And already, at least from personal experience, I know that it takes roughly up to 20 minutes just to wait for an 8-ride van. And by bringing one down from the Lakeshore campus to the Water Tower campus, I mean, would we have to add another van, a few more vans, and then cost-wise, would that be effective? So.
But there are students down here at the Lakeshore campus, and I think that's at the Water Tower campus. And really, it's important to really keep in touch with those students. They are also students. They pay tuition just as we do. And it's important to really build a bond between the Lakeshore campus and the Water Tower campus. So I think it is important to kind of have possibly an 8-ride van, kind of maybe shuttle students back and forth between the 2 campuses. I think that would be a really great idea that we should look into. I feel like it might be a good idea to increase the Student Activities Fund to really fund these things, because it is something that affects students, it affects their safety, and really affects their well-being, and really just helps to make life of a student really easier.
That's something that we've been talking about, is this issue of safety. So I kind of want to hear from you guys. How much of safe transportation depends on student planning, and how much do you think depends on Loyola providing these services?
I would say I lived downtown last year, so I have experience of having situations where I go to events on the Lakeshore campus and then have to get downtown. In a student's life, there's always unplanned mishaps where friends meet other groups of friends. So you're not always ensured a buddy to make it back to this campus. Also, I'm friends with a lot of females, so still there's a threat there. It's really focusing on the students, making sure that they're safe, and making sure that Loyola, since it's between the two campuses, if they offer services on Lakeshore, they should also be offering services to make sure that you get to Water Tower.
In addition to that, I do think that students don't realize the campus safety officers, although the inter-campus thing is an issue that needs to be solved, but campus safety officers at both campuses, if you call campus safety, they will walk you where you need to go as long as it's within walking distance of either Lakeshore or Water Tower campus. In addition, I know campus safety does hotspot tours around both campuses where they actually take you in an 8-ride van and show you where the spots are around at least Lakeshore campus. I'm not sure if they do it on Water Tower campus, and where you should and should not go, and where you should be with with peers and not be walking alone.
Part of it definitely is the student planning. I think students definitely need to know kind of things through the hotspot tours and really kind of understand where safety is an issue in terms of the different campuses. But it's also part of the institution. We pay to go here, and we should really be taken care of by the university that really provides us this education. On top of the education they provide us, they really need to provide us more with this idea and this feeling of really safety to continue to really utilize it, whether it be through the hotspot tours and really just to educate. And that's really the most important part. But there also need to be services, 8-Ride being one of them, campus safety officers and the openness with campus safety, and just really educational policies within Loyola to ensure that students are getting around and they're getting around safe regardless of their circumstance.
Yeah, well, that brings up an interesting thing. We've talked, a lot of this conversation about transportation is centered around adding services, but what other things besides adding services would you work on as USGA president?
A lot of it is policy in terms of student safety, really alcohol safety. Make sure students are educated about the effects of alcohol and really educate students on some things like the Good Samaritan policy. Really things like that are really important to make sure students know. Make sure that in addition to resources that they're educated, they know what's going on. They're always constantly made aware. Instead of having to read in the Phoenix that these things happened on campus, to be made aware right away. Those things are really important for our students.
I mean, I'd like to bring up the fact that I think a bigger issue, or not even a bigger issue, is just the sense of publicity, advertising. As a tour guide, we're told all these certain things that Loyola has as safety. For example, the blue light poles, the average response time is 7 seconds. While you're on campus, you're always able to see 2 at one time. So the fact is, I mean, in addition, the campus police goes through the same amount of training as the Chicago police. Matt brought up the hotspot tours. I think a lot of times Loyola has all these things already in place, just students don't know about it. I also want to bring up the fact that we always talk about raising tuition and we want to decrease it, but if we're always adding some new things, that's like, what is going to pay for that? So.
I also think that students can really utilize, as construction occurs on campus, students need to know where stuff is going to be happening. So besides on the Inside Loyola website, I don't think many students know that the walkway between the chapel and Coffee Hall at Lakeshore campus is going to be closed this week until Memorial Day. Not many students know that, and they're going to need a plan for that. So I think transportation doesn't just stop at 8-Ride and shuttle. It really does have to go to all the paths around campus so that students know where they're able to walk, how they're able to get to class, so that they're able to plan their time accordingly. So I do think that transportation services need to spread the word to students on when they're going to make these changes.
And how do you think you would do that as president?
I definitely think that an all-school email, especially with something when it comes down to changing a walk path or a bike path, needs to be known to the students. I think that USGA can partner with transportation services so that we're able to use our social media outlets, our website. We can send something out to all the student organizations just to make sure that all students really do know what changes are occurring. So I think that we can utilize what we have in place, just make better utilization of it.
Okay, great. We'll move on to the next topic, which is shared governance. So, as you know, this year the USGA has had a shared governance task force, which is currently being chaired by our outgoing Vice President, Stephanie Romeo. And so what specific steps to shared governance would you take to make sure that students have a voice within whatever changes happen to the shared governance model?
I would just say better representation on the Board of Trustees. I know that there are students on that right now, and I don't think that they're being fully utilized. I know for a fact that I've talked to various students on that, and they're really just a figurehead position to say that they're students' voice. But when you are in the room with people who are above Father and Garanzini, we really need to make sure that those students have the resources to be successful in those conversations and really be able to advocate for the student.
Well, the Board of Trustees don't fall under shared governance. What shared governance really refers to is what we're working on as a USGA to really continue this bond of making sure that all the stakeholders are at the table, whether that be students, faculty, and staff. And really that ensures that everyone that is a key stakeholder in this university, that really takes part in this university and participates in this university, is able to continue the work that they're doing and is able to understand and have a voice in what is going on at their university. And really where shared governance can expand is to make sure that faculty understands that students care. I think that's one of the biggest concerns in many conversations. It's to really point out students care, students want to be involved, and no matter what, students deserve the chance to be involved.
I mean, I'd say, just from people I've been talking to, stage one is to tell people what shared governance is. I know someone who's on the committee now that until like a few meetings in, she had no idea what shared governance is. I brought up the issue to friends of mine, and they have no idea what it means. Yes, the benefits of shared governance are there. Students should be included in the decisions of the university. We pay the money, our parents pay the money. We work hard to go to school here. But students don't even know what shared governance is, and I think that's the biggest problem. There's not enough publicity or advertisement for that. And then by increasing that, I feel like that will better, give a better understanding to the students.
And in addition to that, none of the current shared governance system that Loyola has in place, none of those committees have met this year. We have student representatives on those committees, and the chairs haven't called the students into the same room with the faculty, staff, and administrators so that they're able to have those meetings. So at this point, it's an ineffective system that needs to change so that students are able to meet with faculty and staff so that we're able to make decisions with them on our behalf, because ultimately they're kind of they're working for us to make it so that we have the best college education at Loyola.
And Smitty, you mentioned advertising and making students aware of what shared governance is. But I was hoping you could elaborate a little bit about how that would ensure that students have a voice in that model.
I personally believe that a lot of times people don't voice what their opinions or whatnot if they don't know what's going on. I bet we would all agree that. I feel like a lot of times USGA or even a lot of other organizations on campus, they'll use their emails, they'll use the bulletin boards and whatnot, but I feel like really, maybe a bigger poster board or people running around shouting it, because I feel like now a lot of times students do not care if it's just a little brief email that comes through that they can just delete immediately, or if it's something that's just on a sign in passing. I feel like it has to be more tangible and a better way that people in their face kind of know what's going on.
Sean, can I also touch on the Board of Trustees part of the shared governance, if you were to include that in there?
Sure.
As a student representative on 2 different Board of Trustees committees, I've taken the initiative to actually go out and meet with the individual vice presidents who are in charge of each of those committees. And through that meeting with them, I've been able to find myself tasks in order to be able to work with those committees on the board. And then that makes the board take my opinions more seriously so that I'm able to offer more opinions. I'm able to work with them outside of the 4 meetings a year, because with the 4 meetings a year, it's great to have students on those committees, but you really need to do more and make yourself available and take the initiative in order to really advocate for the students.
Sure. All right. So you mentioned something. You mentioned working with administrators, and I think that segues nicely into to this question. So I was hoping each of you could touch a little bit about the relationships that you have with administrators and how you would continue that if you were elected president. Anyone?
I will start.
Sure.
Currently, I chair the Academic Affairs Committee, and really a lot of what I do on academic affairs is work directly with administrators, whether that be Provost Polisaro or one of the deans of the individual schools. Really, my role currently just is to serve as an advocate, and in addition to that, to really different committees, including the University Policy Committee on Academic Affairs, as well as CCAI, the College Coalition on Alcohol Initiatives, and different various academic boards such as the Core Implementation, and
I've been able to kind of engage with different individuals and staff members in the university, from Father Garanzini to Dr. Pelissero to some of the vice presidents through some of my involvement. I'm currently interning for the Associate Dean of Students, and as part of that internship, I've actually gotten to personally get to meet some of the administrators in the Division of Student Development, and I feel like that's helped me not only know them on a personal level, but also as a professional level, because I've been a student representative on a variety of different committees. So I feel like they trust my opinion, and I'm able to really work with them in order to get things done instead of having to go through that introductory phase. So whether it's depending on if it's student development, academic affairs, or even the president, we're able to start right away.
Julie?
I would say the administrator that I've worked closely with the most would be Dr. Kelly. There has been times when we've had meetings start at 4 and we'll go till 6 o'clock because administrators like to hear the student voice, and they like to hear when the students aren't happy and what they can do and what they can see change in this university. That's really why they're there, because they were engaged in their college experience. Most of them had leadership positions, so they really want to hear when the students are unhappy and then strategically plan with you where to go from there.
Smitty?
My strongest connections would be with the fields that I have been more involved in, less USGA and more outside of that in student involvement. Like for example, within campus ministry, as well as the undergraduate admissions or Office of Admissions. Really, however, that being said though, I am a people person, I personally believe, and I do believe I also work well with others. So although right now I do not have the connections that everyone else has parlayed before you, but I can develop them, and I feel like I can develop those strong bonds. And even more so than that, more of my strong bonds are with the students themselves. So although the administrators are important, I feel like a lot of times the bigger say or the bigger voice is the people. So.
Well, Julia, you hit on working with administrators that are friendly with students. I mean, I feel like a lot of administrators, though, necessarily aren't always friendly in terms of kind of working to make sure that students get their voice heard. I guess my question to you then is, how about those administrators that don't necessarily believe that the student voice is not unimportant, but should not be considered as much?
I think in those instances I've had problems with administration before when they don't always agree on the point that I'm trying to push from the student perspective. But I think in that situation it's really important to realize it's not like you demanding anything from the administration, it's really an open dialogue. So really saying, okay, so you see this as a roadblock, but how can we go beyond that? How can we jump that hurdle and think of a creative solution to solve this issue? So it's really seeing it from their perspective, but also still pushing the student voice and still keeping the dialogue open and not closing it off.
And also, in addition to that, I also think that if an administrator doesn't agree with the student, then I think that you need to go survey the students. You can do a quick survey of about 1,000 students. You could do that within a couple days. And then you bring that survey information to the administrator, and you could say, okay, here's what the students think. This isn't just me. This is what everyone else thinks. And then they're going to likely go along with what you're saying, because all administrators are here in some fashion to advocate for the students. So if the students want it, it should happen.
Well, I think that brings up a good question. So, have you been critical of something that, an administrator or the administration does? And if so, how have you, leveraged your relationship with that administrator, to tackle those issues?
I think for me the best example is having worked with the core curriculum this past year. It started off as a rocky path, and at the beginning the faculty and staff didn't really believe that students had a say in what their core curriculum looked like. And really, we made it clear, and I think students made it clear specifically last year. The NAACP chapter on our campus had a student forum to make sure that students were informed of what was going on. And I think following that, it was a lot of informing that happened, and then that eventually led to students actually being at the table and members of the core curriculum committee, which I currently serve as.
I'm currently on the homecoming planning committee for this year, so I think going to the opposite spectrum, instead of academics, doing something more social for the students. And I think that students need to be more engaged on a committee such as homecoming committee, so that they're proud to be at Loyola, so that they're proud to show off to their alumni and parents why they come here. So as part of that committee, making sure that you're challenging who you're working with, so that they know that students aren't going to pay $25 to go into a dining hall to eat food for something and then go to a movie right after that. Students really they want to have free food, they want to have free floats if they're going to have a parade or a festival, and so you really want to make sure that you're advocating for the students, because I think a lot of times it comes down to how much money are they going to pay for a committee such as homecoming.
So that's actually an excellent lead into our next topic, which is about student engagement. So I would like each of you to name one or two examples, concrete examples, of how you would bring the two campuses together. So Matt, we'll start with you.
Sure. I definitely think that you need to have more at the Water Tower campus. I think that we need to they have the movies during the week, perhaps having a dance, similar to Damon Ball, but not quite Damon Ball that happens at Water Tower campus. I think that USGA can possibly partner with DOP and Water Tower campus events to have a dance on the 17th floor of the Lewis Tower so that students can be more engaged at both campuses. I also think that you need to encourage students to, I would say, encourage students to be comfortable going to both campuses. I think that as you have events at the Lakeshore campus, you need to make sure the Water Tower campus students are going to feel motivated to come. So I don't have ideas of what events those could be, but I do think that you need to really publicize more at both campuses.
And I think that's also where transportation comes in a lot of the times. When I lived downtown, that was the biggest obstacle of going to a lot of the more livelier events are at night. So really having that medium to go through. And also I think that the USGA meetings that are held downtown should be publicized more to the downtown students. I think that that would be a great open student forum to have the student voice and say, this is the disconnect between this campus and the other campus, and we don't think that this voice is loud enough in the student government. And I know that we have about 2 a semester, but we really want to utilize that more to get that other voice.
FD, what are your thoughts?
Really, transportation is key to make sure that students feel comfortable getting back and forth. But really, on top of that, to educate students about what is down here. You know, students don't know that there's a convergence studio. They don't know about Terry. They don't. I didn't learn until the middle of my freshman year that you could use your meal plan down here. So really, publicizing those factors, publicizing really what is around our campus. But really, in addition to that, work with registered student organizations. For example, the Latin American Student Organization. They have their Latin Ball down here. So, and that's tends to be a very popular event. So really continue to work with registered student organizations to really bring them down here and to have them utilize these great spaces that we have here at the Water Tower campus.
Smitty?
I mean, not to beat the same drum over and over again, but really it is about publicity. For example, there's the block party that we have every year that not a lot of students know about. I think it'd be kind of cool, let's say, if all classes were out. I'm not saying I can promise this, but it had the idea of a block party where the whole university came down. I think that'd be nice. I know last year they had the block party and I wasn't able to attend because I had a class on the Lakeshore campus. After you brought up the fact of like the Latin Ball, I just really feel like not enough people realize that there's stuff going on down here. The meal plan as well. A lot of times, in my opinion, I mean, from what I've tried it a few times, it kind of tastes like Rambler Room. It's like something different, and it'd be cool like if the freshmen knew about that. They knew they'd come down here, they could still use their meal plan and try some different food.
So we've talked a lot about events being held on campus, or on both campuses rather. So are you content with the majority of events happening on the Lakeshore campus? Should there be a more even distribution? What are your thoughts? Matt?
I think there's a great number of events, both sponsored by the university through the Department of Programming or late night events, but also through student organizations. I think the most important part of one of the most important parts of USGA's role on campus is to allocate the Student Activities Fund to student organizations to hold events. And I think we have great events on campus. From this past week, we had St. Baldrick's Day. We had the Gala de San Valentino a couple weeks ago. All of our student organizations are putting on great events, and I think that we can utilize USGA more to assist them in spreading the events and making it more public for the Loyola community.
Sure. Julia, your thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree that communication is key. I think that there's so many great events, but students are not knowing publicly. It's not being publicized that these events are occurring on campus. So finding a way that USGA can aid student orgs and work with CAN and really make students aware. Currently we have a calendar that's on the website, but a lot of student orgs don't even put their event on that calendar. So making it an accessible way to really figure out what's going on our campus.
FD?
Really, I think a lot of student organizations need incentive to come down here. So maybe possibly even just like encouraging student organizations to really have their events down here. A lot of room reservation issues happen at the Lakeshore campus, so maybe encourage them to come down here and maybe have their events down here. Great events happen down at the Water Tower campus just as they do on the Lakeshore campus. But publicizing is an important thing. I think it's the job of USGA, who gives these funds, to make sure and to keep track of when these events take place. 2 really great events took place on the same day last semester. Robert Kennedy came on campus and we had the Advocate Drag Show on the same time. And really, it's unfortunate because students can't be at these two great events. Really, it's a communication issue, and it's a publicity and USGA just working with these student organizations issue.
Well, now you say you want to encourage student orgs to have events down here. How exactly would you encourage them to do so?
Really, even just saying it, kind of making students know that there are resources here at the Water Tower campus. I feel like so many students don't realize or don't think, have a first instinct to have events here. A lot of students that would have instinctually to go at the Lakeshore campus are really students within the College of Arts and Sciences. So really have students within the professional schools also get involved with the College of Arts and Sciences, as well as vice versa. It's important to really have a communication between the schools as well as between these organizations to make sure that they continue to stay here on the campus and on the other campus.
Sure. Smitty, your thoughts?
I mean, I'd bring up the idea that I don't know if this is possible, but maybe a requirement for certain organizations to have an event down here. I feel like, at least in my 3 years here at Loyola, one thing I haven't done enough of is seeing the city of Chicago. I'm very content to be on the Lakeshore campus. It's nice. It's very accessible. I'm a mathematics major, so the College of Arts and Sciences is right there. All my classes are there. I mean, I haven't been down here since last semester, and I was just trying to get home. So the thing is, I think it'd be really nice if Loyola offered more events which got you to see the different neighborhoods, see the different parts of Chicago, especially down here, and have a way maybe that the organizations are required to do so.
Now, on the subject of engagement, I think we can all agree that one of the things that probably had the biggest engagement from USGA this year is the issue of bottled water. And as you all know, there's a referendum on the ballot asking whether or not you support ending the sale of bottled water on campus. Are you voting in favor of it, and why or why not? So we'll start with you, Matt.
I am voting in favor of banning bottled water on campus as an engaged student on our campus. I'm not saying that if I'm elected, I'm going to work with the administration to ban bottled water, but I personally have made a choice that I don't want to drink bottled water. I've educated myself through documentaries like Tapped, that's been sponsored by the Student Environmental Alliance, and I know that there are risks of bottled water, whether they are pollution or whether it's the chemicals that are used in the bottles. So I've made a conscious decision that I don't want bottled water on campus, and I don't want to drink bottled water, but that doesn't mean that if I'm elected, the students are going to feel that same way.
Julia, your thoughts?
My thoughts would be the issue of bottled water was proposed to the Justice Committee about a year and a half ago. So that was a really big issue that students felt passionately about. So they reached out to USGA, and I really thought that that partnership was the perfect way to utilize USGA. I think also that it's on USGA to help them publicize the educational aspects around it. I do support not seeing bottled water on this campus or on Lakeshore campus because it is a social justice issue of privatization of water, and it says something about our schools standing behind a policy that they really fully agree with and keeping those ideals in their business practices.
Efty, your thoughts?
Really, I personally will vote yes to ban bottled water on campus. However, the issue really isn't about my view. What it comes down to is how the referendum turns out. And if students believe that bottled water should be sold on campus, students have the right to believe that bottled water should be sold on campus. Really, it's how the referendum ends up turning out. Yes, I do agree that education is a big component to understanding the problem of bottled water because it is a human rights issue. It is also an environmental issue. But I think it's within the right of our students as consumers and as students of this university who pay tuition and buy these commodities that really they get to decide. How this referendum goes is really how I want to move my administration forward.
Smitty?
As well, I would vote to ban water bottles on campus. Like I said, doesn't mean I'm forcing that vote as well onto other students, but that's just my personal opinion. As you can see on campus, we have all these water fill stations for personal canteens, and I feel like if we've already made the steps thus far to go towards banning water bottles, why not finish it? You still see Fiji water sold at certain cafes, Smart Water, but then you have all these stations all over campus. I feel like that since we've already made the necessary steps, we might as well finish the job.
I have a question, if that's okay, for anyone who can answer. Is if bottled water were to be banned on campus, how would you work with the students to make sure that they have an alternative if they don't have a canteen? How would you make sure that they're able to drink water without actually buying it, and if they don't want to stand by a water fountain all day? How will you make sure that students have access to this water?
I'll answer that. Sure. I brought that very issue up at CAN to the student leaders to see how they could see it practically in their everyday events and also their everyday use. So one idea that was proposed that Seattle University does, that there's a drop-off and pickup station. So if you forget your canteen one day, you have a glass that you can take, and then it'll be on the honor system of putting it back, and really thinking of more creative solutions and opening it up to the student voice and to the student forum to see what we could all come together around.
Sure. I think one of the things that I've noticed in the discussion is mention of the results of the referendum dictating how you would go forth in your administration. Is that, so what is the acceptable level? Is it 50% plus one? Is it 60%? If the results come in the negative, would you still continue to advocate to end the sale of bottled water? Julia?
I think it's about also standing up for what you believe is right, and sometimes you need to be a leader in that sense and be like, this is something that's wrong. So I think also the student voice is very important in this issue. I think that 51% would say it all, that over half the students feel this way. So
I think the 51% may be able to say it all if you have about 4,000 to 5,000 students voting in the election. If you only have about 1,000 students voting in the election, that's just over 500 students that are in approval of banning bottled water, which is definitely nowhere near the 10,000 undergraduates, 16,000 if you include our graduate students. So if 500 out of 16,000 students if 500 out of 16,000 students voted their opinion, I don't think that's a proper representation of Loyola, so I really do think it depends on how many students vote in the election, but I definitely think you need at least 4,000 or 5,000 students to actually participate in the voting.
Matt, would you have any ideas of how to get students more engaged? Because I know Loyola has had problems getting surveys filled out by all the students. So how do you think that you would want to see that turn out?
Students, if a survey is short and if a survey offers some sort of prize, I think students are likely to participate in it. I also think that when surveys are sent out, they're just sent out via email, and students do not know. Like, a lot of students will ignore their email. They won't even read it, even if they see a subject line that says survey. So I think that it's really reaching out to students, telling them, hey, you have this survey in your inbox. Here's what you can expect out of the survey, and here's how you can help Loyola. So you have to publicize the survey not just through email, but also through posters and signs, and you also have some sort of incentive so that students are going to feel motivated. Plus, you want to keep it short because no one, at least for me, I don't like surveys that require written responses. I like surveys that is a yes or no answer or that offer my opinion on a scale. So I think that that's how you could get students more engaged.
As well as I'd say, it depends on who's giving the survey. If it's just someone that you have no idea who they are, I feel like you're not going to listen to them, you're going to bypass them on your way to class. If it's someone who maybe is some important figure on campus or important group on campus, or if, let's say, we give the surveys to the head of certain organizations. If the head of the organization is requiring or asking its members to fill out the surveys, we're going to get a better response as well.
And that's really where it comes in to really work with your student organizations. If the president of your organization really encourages students to get involved and to fill out these surveys, you're likely to get a better response rate. I think it's more important for the quality of the research as well. Like Matt said, making sure they're short, sweet, to the point, making sure they're precise and accurate. I think we've done a great job kind of developing those means and measures. But on top of that, really kind of gauging students and engaging them and making sure we're not going too far, that we're not emailing them too much, kind of finding that fine balance to make sure that we're discussing things with our students, but we're not going overboard and kind of annoying them, basically.
And if I can add something,
Sure.
I also think, too, that when you give a survey, you have to make sure that you utilize those results. The USGA gave a survey in September of this year, and although we have the results, I don't recall anyone actually utilizing those results in anything that the organization has done. And not to say that we haven't tackled issues that were discussed during the survey, but we haven't used the survey responses and the percentages of responses of the survey to actually say this is what the students want. It's just been the issues that USGA has tackled, but we haven't utilized the responses that we've gotten from the students.
Sure. And I think this goes back to sort of an issue of, and not to start a philosophical argument here, but we don't take surveys on every issue that we tackle. We vote on plenty of resolutions concerning any number of different topics without surveying the students to see what they feel about it, since theoretically we are the representatives of the students. When does an issue rise to a level that requires students to vote in the affirmative in order to move forward?
When it affects them. I think that you can have an easy resolution that says as the undergraduate student government, we support adding water bottle refillers on campus, which was a resolution that was done this year that didn't result in a survey. I think that something similar to that required individuals to really be able to engage with the student body, and like for USGA to really say, this is what the students want. This initiative isn't going to affect the students. They're not going to have to pay more for this. But when you're taking something away from the students or going to charge them, you need to get their opinion on it.
And that's why it's also important to continue to really keep a great relationship with our administration. The plan for the refill stations were already in our development plan as a university. It wasn't just an idea that just suddenly came to USGA and we just had. It was something that the university was planning on doing. And really it was the encouragement of the USGA really that brought it out and brought it to the students and make sure that they know, so that when they see these things around, they understand what it's for and why it works. It really is a communication and implementation kind of thing.
And not just communication at the major points, at the major decisions, more so communications along the bullet points along the way. Now they don't need to know every fine line that's said and done, but like the major things that will add to the result should be known to the students.
But I think we should do our students justice and make sure that they understand what the process looks like and to really understand kind of how things work on our administrative level. I think that's what will get our students more engaged in what's going on a bigger level on how it impacts them, as well as how it impacts their day-to-day and what they really think, both whether it be, you know, within the classes they take or within, you know, the water they drink or the food they eat. Students deserve to kind of understand a little bit of the process that USGA really goes through to really understand, and it really kind of releases the stigma that USGA doesn't really do anything. I think that it's a really helpful thing to have students understand the process.
I think also utilizing the referendum is a really important thing to do. Previously, USGA has not utilized it when there are many issues that students would like to see on it. I think 5 years ago was the last one, is that correct, about the green fee? So really engaging students, because some students want to vote for the USGA elections just to get their voice out on certain opinions, on certain issues.
Well, I don't think anyone really answered my question. When does an issue rise to the level of requiring talking to students to get their opinion before we do anything with it? I don't think anyone really answered the question.
Well, I mean, Matt brought up the fact that it's when it affects you. I agree to some extent. I feel like everything that affects students shouldn't always be sent out a survey. Like no one wants that many emails. But I'd say it depends on, I mean, it's up to the USGA board, like up to the committees that make those decisions of which ones you think would be the most important to the students. Now, let's say you're unsure of that, you can always survey a small amount of students from maybe a variety of different organizations, different groups on campus. That doesn't mean we have to send out a survey to everyone on campus, but to a certain group, and then we can assess whether it's enough to make a decision about it.
And
it definitely is absolutely when it affects the students and when it affects the students' lives directly, whether or not they will have water bottles on campus and sold within the stores here on campus really affects students there in their day-to-day. Some students that do choose to drink bottled water choose to buy it at somewhere like Union Station or Terry. So really to make sure that they know these things. But also it's important to really know that the USGA cares and is available. I think it ends up becoming something like that. It's important for the USGA to always stay open.
And I'll reiterate what I said before, that I do think that if it's going to affect the students, then you need to get their opinion. Whether it's taking something away, whether it's going to be charging them more money for something, you really do need to get what the students think. If it's like I, again, said before, if it's like the water bottle refiller stations, students aren't paying for it. That's just an addition to campus that they're able to benefit from. But when it negatively affects the students, you really should get their opinion.
Let's move on to the final topic, which is about leadership. So why don't we briefly just tell us about your leadership and management style and how that would affect the meetings that you would have to run as president.
I really like having a communal sense within the committees and organizations that I lead. I like to make sure that all people that are involved kind of have a role, that have a voice, and to really keep it casual but know when to keep it formal and when to make it something that is that should be taken seriously. Everything should be taken with a grain of salt, in my opinion. And really it's as a leader, I like to keep things within the communal sense, like I said. Really to make sure everyone's involved and to make sure that everyone is doing what they can to really make a benefit within the USGA.
I think it's important as a leader is not to exercise your power over everyone, but really empower others to realize their potential. So I would say my leadership style is very much so of an empowerment style. So really stepping back during meetings, making sure that everything's structured and there's the groundwork, but then letting really other senators flourish, letting them take over certain issues, because the more responsibility you give to a senator or anyone, the more engaged they're going to be in that issue.
I also think that if you are going to be leading something, you also need to give credit where credit is due. Many of the individuals who are leaders on our campus aren't the ones that are actually making change on campus. So it's not all about I, and me. If something happens that USGA does, I'm going to point that out to the students that are actually getting that work done, because I'm not going to take credit for something that I didn't do firsthand. And I think that it's really encouraging that community amongst each other. I think that it's encouraging collaboration. This past year, the USGA planned a retreat at LUREC, and I think that USGA members were able to get together in a social environment and not just talk about USGA work, but really get to know each other so that we're best able to advocate for the student body.
All right, so now we're going to move on to the question and answer session with members of our audience here at the Convergence Studio.
I'm a junior here at Loyola, and I'm a journalism major. And I actually wanted to go back to the question that Sean had put forth before, asking what you believe that what would qualify as a referendum. And I also wanted to hear specifically 1 to 2 issues that each of you would consider one that would affect students, because I was a little concerned that, I mean, I would imagine all the decisions that USGA makes does affect students, or at least I would really hope that it does. So I was wondering if each of you could give me 1 or 2 issues that you think would be very important for students to actually vote on, or the larger student body to vote on, not water bottles, since that will be voted on. So,
Matt?
I think one issue needs to be an increase in the Student Activities Fund. I think that if there is an increase in the SAF, I think students should have firsthand be able to really say if they're in favor of that increase. I know on our USGA survey we did have that as part of one of the questions, but I think that getting more specific and saying, will you approve an increase in the SAF about 5% so that it could go to student services on campus, so that students really are having the say of what they want to see on campus. I also think that a referendum item should be where we're allocating money within the student government. And I think that do students really want the SAF to get most of the money, or do students want a particular event to get most of the money? So are we having money come to USGA, or are we giving it to DOP to have more events like Colossus that they're having this next weekend?
Julia, quickly.
I would say the 2 issues that I'd like to see on a referendum would be dining services, really tuning into how students feel about our dining provider, and go into maybe a specific issue like sustainability in the dining hall. And then also another would be, for transportation, would you like to see a raise in the Student Activities Fund to sea shuttles on the weekend? Are you willing to do that? So.
I definitely agree that an increase in the Student Activities Fund should definitely be one of the issues that we should tackle on a referendum basis. And on top of that, really to engage students' opinion as to where it should go, whether it be shuttle services at night, or whether it be 8-ride, or whether it be for the activities that they have, but also to gauge students' content about the health and safety services that they receive, whether that be through the Wellness Center or down here at Water Tower campus, for example. They don't have a Wellness Center. So really to work to gauge the health and safety issues.
And Smitty?
I'd say one would have to be to increase the level of student involvement, as well as their connection to campus. Like what could the university do to increase school spirit and the connection people have as a Rambler? I also believe another thing would be the idea of the changing of the core and the graduation requirements. I know they just added a class that takes away one of the ethics values classes, but now it brings up the fact that as me being a senior, anyone becoming a junior, as well as sophomore, with that class, how's that going to affect what they've taken thus far, and just keeping students in mind of what they need to do to graduate, because at the end of the day, we're all here as well, besides the experience, but also to get degrees.
All right, next question.
Hi, my name is Kristen. I'm a junior at Loyola. I have a question which has nothing to do with this campus, but I was wondering, so we hear about it, the 99%, the 1%. At Loyola, I feel like we're really focused with Loyola. And in the community they're in, we see the 99%. We see there's refugees, there's so many low-income individuals, and yet Loyola students are really confined to the bubble of Loyola, and not even confined, but they're afraid to step outside and see the beautiful resources that we have in Rogers Park. And what would you do to really get people involved with their community? And what would you do to have Loyola not hurt the community, not buy out these local businesses, these mom and pop businesses that they're using for residence halls, and that really drastically hurts the community. So how would you strengthen a relationship with Rogers Park and really like get students involved with their community and show them the difference they can make?
Julia.
I'll answer that first. One of the first things I'd like to see if I were president of USGA is really having a community engagement committee. I was on that committee when it was an ad hoc committee about 2 years ago, and it really started some great work. So really discussing with key leaders in the community, how do you feel about Loyola's construction? How do you feel about the developments? How do you feel about the new chain stores coming into an area that was usually locally owned by like mom and pop stores? So looking at using that committee to also then reflect on Loyola's community, like school spirit, really focusing on that. We'd also like to see open up our campus more to community members, really in environmental issues, really reaching out to some of the leaders in environmental leadership in the community, and really focusing on having an open forum and open dialogue between Rogers Park and Loyola.
Matt?
And Loyola also does have a community relations office. I think it's really important to have students work with that office to make sure that the students are able to get in contact with members of the community. Whenever Loyola does purchase something, or whenever Loyola is planning to build or expand their campus, they do go and talk to members of the community, and I think that it's important to make sure that students know that, because not many students do know that we're doing that.
And I also would like to say the fact of like what Matt brought up is with the advertising is also the fact of, I mean, Garanzini, by doing what he is and the changes he's making to the community, he's also helping the community. He's making the community safer for everyone as a whole, whether it's Loyola students or the residents of Rogers Park. I'd also like to bring up the fact that just in general, the process that's occurring around campus and the engagement that we're doing is benefiting. One example is right now Loyola is installing a service or a justice house that's going to be right next to Loyola Hall where the mathematics department is. And I feel like that's another thing. Publicity-wise, not enough students realize that these students will be required to do justice every month, service every month, whether it's downtown or near Rogers Park.
I was also a member of that community engagement committee, and it was then that I really realized that it is important for us to continue to have this dialogue with the community within Rogers Park, especially given all these acquisitions that we've recently had. But that being said, I think it's the job of the president to really reach out to community relations. But we do have many student organizations here that do work within the community. We have students that volunteer with refugees within the area. We do programs like LIFT. So really, part of it is to work with our social justice organizations to really find out and hone in on how they're working to engage the community and to really continue to expand that, and to also just continue the dialogue. I think that's important within both the community as well as, yeah.
All right, and one last question.
My name is Francis Ogutu. I'm a junior, and my question revolves two things. One, how are you going to address the issue of sports spirit within Loyola student body? And then secondly, the diversity. I've seen like it's not been really addressed well, so I wanted to get your views on that.
All right. Smitty?
Well, I'd say the first question and revolving around school spirit, I feel like that's to deal with the resuscitation of the school spirit. I know recently the Rainbow Rowdies, that whole program, it's not really died, but for example, it was required this year to pay $35 just to be a rowdy. And I think that's an issue. To be a fan, you have to pay. That's a problem from the get-go. I'd also like to bring up the fact that in relation to diversity, I think that's once again, not enough students know. For example, 1/3, every 1 in 3 students is not Caucasian, is non-white. And I feel like, as we said before at the last debate, maybe with the special tours that we have on campus with the incoming students, making them aware of the options for students, non-Caucasian students, or Caucasian, or non-Caucasian students, it would be very beneficial.
With the issue of spirit on campus, really to make sure to continue to have these physical symbols, my running mate Nicholas Ramirez has really been working on these initiatives with his Facilities and Transportations Committee. But on the issue of diversity, really to encourage students to continue in the dialogue around diversity. Diversity isn't purely just diversity within admissions. It's within the services that we have for our students and we provide for our students to make sure that they are taken care of when they get here and that they are taken care of, especially as students of lower socioeconomic statuses that minority students tend to be. Really, it's a continued dialogue to have.
Julia?
I would also want to utilize for the school spirit the community engagement committee, so have that also focus in on the Loyola. Right now, the facilities and transportation committee is focusing on the school spirit, and I think that their time and resources should really be focusing on transportation, because a lot of our issues in the debate have revolved around transportation. And also looking at diversity from an actual investment from the administration, seeing a social justice resource center, and having special communities for people to engage in, and supporting academic programs such as Black World Studies, Gender Studies, and Asian Studies. Continuing to build.
Sorry, we're going to have to cut you off because we want to get to the Matt's answer.
Thank you. My running mate Tori is a former varsity athlete, so she knows how it is to be an athlete at Loyola and to have students not always at your events. I think we can utilize Tori's experience in order to change school spirit. I think with diversity, we have initiatives already in place between the Black Men's Initiatives, between LUCES, STARS. We have the First Generation Connects program that we can utilize to make students do it.
All right. Well, that's it for us here tonight. We want to thank the staff at the Convergence Studio for hosting us, and voting begins tomorrow, so check your email for the ballot. Thank you and good night.